Hey, greetings everyone. Let's have a look at predators and predation. Can't have one without the other, right? And we're going to use our coyote as the example here. I'll try to remember to tell you the background of each one of the photos. So this one was a camera trap image from my pond in my back field. I just wish I had a better camera out, and it would have been a better quality picture, but still pretty cool. Must have been a fox den on the neighbor. Must have been a coyote den on the neighbor's property, and I was getting young coyotes all summer long. Let me just give you a few things to think about. So these are not absolutes, but these are in generals. So, for example, in general, removing an entire species is usually harmful to the environment. So, um, wildlife managers in the modern era are rarely looking to eliminate an entire species unless it is an introduced species. So coyotes are native to North America. Most wildlife managers are not looking to eliminate them. There's individuals that are looking to eliminate them, but not wildlife professionals. Next, I want you to remember that predators and prey have coexisted for millennia. Well, what do you think the deer did before people got here? How do you think they evaded predators? The same way that they would if we stopped trying to, quote, help them along. So the deer in North America had all kinds of predators: wolves, mountain lions, coyotes, to name three, that preyed upon them, and they managed to survive right alongside them. If you're having a problem with the number of prey in your area, so let's say you're a rabbit hunter and you find that rabbit numbers are down, look and see if they have all the components they need to survive before you just start automatically blaming predators. So let's say I do not have adequate cover for rabbits and they're dying of exposure. Well, killing all the coyotes in the world isn't going to make a good enough of a difference if I don't give them also the cover that they need. If I don't have enough gray squirrels in my woodlot to my liking, and I eliminate the predator, the coyote, from that, but they're in low numbers because of food, then I haven't really done much to help them all, have I? The third thing I'd like you to think about is predator effects seem to be less or compensatory in more complex communities and are more likely to be additive in simple communities. So let me just say that one more time. The effect that the predator has on a species is more likely to be compensatory if we have a complex community. And it's more likely to just be additive if we have a simple community. So a simple community would be something, this is a bad example, but the first one that came to my mind is a cornfield. So instead of having a rich area with lots of plants, we've created a monoculture, right? So if I think about having an area where there's lots of wildlife missing, then the effects of predators is in general going to be more additive because there's fewer factors already influencing these animals. It's less of a natural system. But here in the Finger Lakes, we have a very robust ecosystem on the whole. So we have more of our predator effect is compensatory and less additive. Hey, if you're not sure what those two terms mean, you should have learned those in a previous lecture. And finally, prey protection, including from livestock, or including livestock from predator control, is more likely a local solution rather than a broad scale one. So if I need to protect my cows, killing the predators in my backyard is usually going to be helpful. But if I want to protect my cows and I range all over the place and shoot every coyote that I ever see, or wolf or mountain lion or whatever the predator is, that's less likely to help out. Likewise, if I own a piece of property and I get rid of all the predators on that property, I am likely to change the population of the prey species, but only at that local level. Like if I'm doing it and my neighbor's not, it's not going to really do much good. in the long run. I'll have some local effects to it, but I'm not likely to have a large scale impact. The Wildlife Society is the premier professional organization in North America when it comes to all things wildlife. And if you ever wonder what you should think about something like, let's say, sport hunting or trophy hunting or uh, selling wildlife products, anything that has to do with wildlife, the Wildlife Society has probably put out a position paper on it. And here are some of their thoughts on predator control and wildlife damage in general. There's 9 of them. I'm going to go through each one of them with you, and I do want you to pay attention here because the mere fact that there's 9 components to their position should indicate to you 2 things. First, they've really thought about this. And second, maybe it's a bit more complicated than gun go boom, coyote go dead, deer be better, right? Like maybe this is a more complicated issue than some hunters might make you believe. First, the Wildlife Society recognizes that wildlife damage management is an important part of modern wildlife management. Look, let's at least get this straight that there is a need for wildlife damage management. Second, we recognize that nuisance wild animals are common in many human occupied situations and may need special management attention as well as an astute understanding of cultural carrying capacity to alleviate problems they create. Wow. Thank goodness I already taught you guys about cultural carrying capacity. So there's a couple pieces here. Let me just break them down. First, they're telling you that they recognize that nuisance wild animals are common in many human occupied situations. So notice that you pretty much don't become a nuisance animal until you include humans into the equation. We're the ones that consider the animal a nuisance. Rarely are they a nuisance unless humans are involved. Invasive species is a good example of wildlife that can be a nuisance even without humans. But the question is, how did the wildlife get to be invasive in the first place? By humans. And nuisance wildlife is going to need special management attention in many cases, as well as a great understanding of cultural carrying capacity. So you as the manager are going to need to understand what the community is able to tolerate in order to alleviate the problem that they create. A great example of this is someone seeing a coyote in a suburban neighborhood, especially during the day. Well, that coyote's probably been living there, or other coyotes have been inhabiting that suburban neighborhood for a very long time. But suddenly someone sees it, and now all of a sudden it becomes a problem, only because they're made aware that they're there. The cultural carrying capacity is fairly low in most suburban neighborhoods for coyotes because the reputation is they will kill my cats, they may even go after my children. Better safe than sorry, get rid of them. So if you're a wildlife manager, you need to approach that situation not just with cold hard facts, but also with an understanding of how the people that live in that community are genuinely thinking about it. Whether their fear is rational or not, it's real to them. Did I just say that in a cool way? Because I hope that was. The idea is that you probably understand coyotes are not a threat to humans, but they don't know that. And in the end, you may be battling their perception of coyotes more than you're actually battling coyotes. And in number 3, Wildlife Society supports those wildlife damage prevention and or management programs and techniques that are biologically, socially, environmentally, and economically valid, effective, and practical. Boy, that's a mouthful. So they have to be biologically, socially, environmentally, and economically valid. And to be economically valid, they have to be effective and practical. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right. economically valid, effective, and practical. Maybe I need to increase the emphasis on that one comma there. So they need to make sense biologically. They need to make sense socially. So, shooting a coyote in the middle of a suburban neighborhood in the middle of the afternoon while the kids are leaving the school bus might be biologically acceptable, but not socially. And it should be good for the environment because, I don't know, putting out a lot of poison for coyotes may effectively kill them, but wouldn't be environmentally sound. And then it needs to be economically valid. And I kept wanting to make economically valid the term. It needs to be economically valid, effective, and practical. And to me, economic validity equals effective and practical. I just think I'm thinking of this in a slightly different way than they are. Does it cost too much money to enact this? That's one of the things that's been argued about contraception for white-tailed deer, for example. That partly it's biologically difficult to get an animal in the wild to stop breeding. They don't read the pamphlets. We've discovered that long ago. But in order to invoke a sterilization project on white-tailed deer, it is incredibly expensive. Or another way to say that, not economically practical for most communities. This is all just one point, but look at all the different pieces to it. The Wildlife Society encourages research to improve methods of assessing damage caused by wildlife, assessing effectiveness and environmental impacts of damage management programs, preventing and managing wildlife damage, including health hazards and nuisance problems, assessing alternatives available to landowners or managers for wildlife damage prevention and or management, understanding people's level of tolerance for a variety of human-wildlife conflicts, and the social and biological factors that influence their decision making. This is what's called wildlife stakeholder acceptance capacity. Wow, there's a lot here. A, assessing damage caused by wildlife. You know, it's so easy to assume that the wildlife is causing the damage, but to actually measure it becomes a different story. So let's say there's a lot of grain that's disappearing from my silos. Blaming mice and rats for it is probably accurate, but we should have a good measurement of it and see how much is actually being lost. Next, we need to then assess the effectiveness and the environmental impacts of the management programs that we enact. So not only do we go out and trap a bunch of coyotes, show them off to the landowner, and he or she is then happy. Well, that's not effective. That what you want to do is say, have we solved the problem? Are fewer sheep being killed? And then we need to know what other environmental impacts are happening because of our efforts. Next is preventing and managing wildlife damage, including health hazards and nuisance problems. So again, if we're talking about wildlife damage, it's not always predators. So bird poop would be a good example of a wildlife problem because it causes health hazards. Geese are a great example of that. We should assess alternative courses of action that are available to the landowners and managers, either for wildlife damage prevention or its management. And then finally, we need to understand people's level of tolerance for a variety of human-wildlife conflicts and the social and biological factors that influence their decision making. So a stakeholder is anybody that holds a stake in this. Let's say the NFL. Stakeholders in the NFL include all the owners, all the players, all the fans, but also the people that sell the hot dogs at the stadium and the people that sell the tickets, so like Ticketmaster, people that sell souvenirs outside of it, the parking lot attendants. So all the stakeholders would be, and I'm sure there's more that I haven't thought of, radio sports announcers, talk show hosts. All of those are stakeholders to various degrees, and what they're asking here is, what is their capacity to accept human-wildlife conflict? Sort of the same concept as carrying capacity. but just specifically talking about nuisance wildlife in this case. Number five, Wildlife Society recommends wildlife damage management programs that are cost effective and whose benefits outweigh risk. I'm not sure how that's different than what we've heard already. And number six, they support the use of efficient, safe, and economical methods of preventing or controlling depredating animals that cause human wildlife conflicts and which pose jeopardy to other wildlife populations, including threatened or endangered species. So some of that would really be about introduced species, but doesn't have to be. You know, red-cockaded woodpeckers are found in the southeast and they're endangered. And they, like other woodpeckers, live in cavities. Well, guess who else lives in cavities? Flying squirrels do. So one of the programs for increasing red-cockaded woodpecker numbers is eliminating flying squirrels. So flying squirrels that never hurt anybody are being killed in the name of trying to not jeopardize the endangered red-cockaded woodpecker. Number seven, encourage and support educational programs in wildlife damage prevention and management to ensure that those in need of wildlife damage management information have access to currently approved techniques and methodologies. I love this one because this is really what I've devoted my life towards, right? Education. So the idea here is that people are always going to have a need for this information, and we should encourage and support quality educational programs, because if they're not going to learn it from professionals, they're going to learn it from amateurs, and the void will always be filled, or people will just invent their own ideas. So if you want to try to tell people that predators are good, you are going to need to counteract all of the amateurs that are out there telling them predators are bad. Number eight, support biologically sound laws and regulations governing wildlife damage prevention and management. So the Wildlife Society, of course, doesn't have any direct ability to enact a law, but they can support them. So they can tell all of their members, hey, we think this is a really good law. Or they could hire lobbyists. I'm not sure that the Wildlife Society does. I don't believe they do. But that would be another way to help influence laws and regulations. So if you were wondering if something like the Endangered Species Act was supported by professional wildlifers, you could go to the Wildlife Society page and find out what their stance is about that. And lastly, the Wildlife Society recommends that eliminating wildlife habitat in order to reduce serious threats to human and domestic health and safety should only be considered in unique circumstances, like wildlife habitat near an airport. The impacts on all wildlife resources should be evaluated before landowners and managers choose this option. Gosh, this one's worth just saying one more time, because a lot of people would say, hey, we've got coyotes in a suburb. Well, you know how to get rid of the coyotes in the suburb? We got to get rid of all that brush over there. We got to get rid of all those shrubby places. Well, we'll cut down all of that, manicure it, we'll mow it all into lawn. That'll get rid of them coyotes. And it may, but at what cost? So they're saying, look, eliminating wildlife habitat in order to solve a problem should be a last resort. And something like having a wetland near an airport would encourage large birds in large numbers to come in contact with airplanes. Maybe we really need to get rid of that wetland. Like, I know wetlands are good, but can we find a different place to create a wetland? This one isn't working for this place. It's too dangerous for people. That's the example that they're giving. You guys all with me? Why don't you take a pause the video for a second, take a stretch, maybe even yawn if you have to, because I've bored you so much, and then we will talk about coyotes in New York State. Are you back? Did you come back? I guess if you didn't, I wouldn't know. Hey, here I am talking about coyotes in New York, and that's a picture of a coyote that I took in California. I was at the Salton Sea, and he came over And obviously, I feel like he's been fed before. He was expecting a handout that I did not give him, but was still able to have a cool encounter here. Let me start out with a statement. First, SUNY ESF conducts research on coyotes in New York. I don't know if they have any current projects right at the moment, but I'm going to talk about two different projects that they had. In '08 and 9, they did a project where they backtracked radio collared coyotes to see what they had been eating. And in that winter, only 8% of the deer carcasses that were visited in the winter could be conclusively identified as being killed by coyotes. So, do coyotes kill deer? Yes. But how many? Not as many as you think, is probably the answer there. So, of all the carcasses they fed on, only 8% of them could be conclusively identified as being killed by coyotes. So, what are the rest of them? Well, there's going to be roadkill. There's going to be ones that were shot by hunters and never recovered, human hunters. There are going to be ones that are going to die of effects of the winter, so weather or food availability or accident. And then, let's be honest, there were some deer that were killed by coyotes, but examining the carcass couldn't conclusively show that it was the coyotes that did the killing. So I'm sure that happened, but I think that's pretty rare. Well, you can argue with me and say you don't think it's very rare, but these folks have good ways of being able to tell who the killer was, and I don't think they make mistakes a lot. Many of the carcasses that they examined had either signs of injury or disease. So these are animals that were already dying of another agent, and the coyotes just took advantage of the free meal. Now, fawns are a different story. So coyotes probably kill more fawns than they do winter adult deer. And even in this study, in the spring, they had some coyotes that they tracked that were collared that never killed a fawn. So I see this term all the time. I belong to a couple hunting pages on Facebook, and somebody will post a picture of a dead coyote, and I got to tell you, the bloodier and more graphic the better, right? Like, I don't want to just kill it. I want his head to explode. His eyes better be bugging out. He better have died a gruesome grisly death, because that's what he deserves. And often they will tag the photo with another fawn killer eliminated or dead or shot or whatever. So calling a coyote a fawn killer is accurate in general, but even in this study they found that some coyotes didn't kill any fawns at all. So, what does that mean? Well, it means here that coyotes don't ingest as much deer as you thought they did, and some of the deer that they ingest is stuff that they didn't even kill themselves, they just scavenged. Another coyote study that was done at ESF was called a howl survey, and they went around the state and they played recordings of coyotes howling during the breeding season to try to get answers. And if you howl during the breeding season in a coyote's territory, they would very likely howl back because they would consider you to be an intruder. What are you doing in here? This is our area. And they estimated approximately, now I rounded this number, but they indicated approximately 15,000 breeding pairs in New York. So 15,000 times 2 equals 30,000 breeding coyotes in New York. What they couldn't measure is how many non-breeding coyotes there are in New York State. Because if I howled during the breeding season in a territory of a breeding pair, a non-breeding coyote should not answer. He should keep his big mouth shut, or her big mouth shut, because they're not interested in looking for trouble. And they say that it could be as many as 30,000 non-breeding coyotes in New York State. So ESF's official recommendation of the DEC for how many coyotes are in New York State? Between 30 and 60,000. Now, I don't know if that number sounds high or low to you. We're talking about the entire state, right? So 60,000 coyotes in the entire state, maybe that's not a lot. What we really need to know next is, where are we compared to their carrying capacity? Is that even close? Could New York State have 100,000 coyotes and still have enough food and shelter and water and cover and space for them? All the things that an animal needs. I know I repeated myself a little bit in there. Just go with it. I don't know. What if our carrying capacity is only 20,000 and we're way over it and coyotes are eating us out of house and home? Well, we'd find that out pretty quick, wouldn't we? Like, all the mice would be gone, the squirrels would be gone, all the prey base would be eliminated. I don't see that happening. This study was done, I don't know, 7 years ago. So if we were really in trouble because there were too many coyotes, well, we would be seeing a cascade effect throughout the trophic levels, and we would have all kinds of prey base eliminated, and no one has sounded the alarm on that. So although it sounds like a big number to most people when you say that, it may not be a big number compared to how many could actually inhabit New York without depleting the resources. I do have to tell you about this picture. So this is also a California picture, but this is a Yosemite National Park picture. I was there with some relatives, and my niece and nephew were there from Australia. And this coyote comes strolling down the road while we're standing outside this restaurant to be seated. And I just look at my brother and say, I gotta go. I gotta go take pictures. I'll meet you guys in the restaurant. And my nephew Luke wanted to come with me. So we go, and we're taking pictures, and we're seeing how other people are reacting to this coyote as they see it. And the coyote's literally hunting on the landscape where all the people are. And he spots this ground squirrel and makes a bolt for it and catches it and swallowed it whole. It was absolutely amazing. I think he was 11-year-old nephew at the time, just his eyes were bugging out of his head. He'd never seen anything like it before. There were some people that were oohing and ahhing along with us. There were other people that were saying, "Oh, that poor ground squirrel." And then, believe it or not, there were people that literally walked by without even seeing the animal there with the ground squirrel in his mouth. He swallowed it. He regurgitated it, swallowed it again. It was pretty cool. Okay. How do coyotes respond to a decreased population density? Let's say I live in Ontario County, and we have every year we do a coyote hunt, and just to help the deer population, help the squirrels. You're welcome, everybody. You don't even have to pay us. We'll just do it for free. And so we keep eliminating coyotes. So do you know how coyotes respond to decreased density in their population? They have larger litter sizes. More females breed because there's less stress, and more pups survive because there's more food available. So if I kill a coyote, or if I go on a rampage one winter and kill a bunch of coyotes, they respond by producing even more the next year. If I keep a high population of coyotes, let's do the opposite here. The litter sizes are smaller, fewer females breed, and fewer pups survive due to a more limited food availability. Folks, this is just how it works. And I don't think coyotes are unique to this. I'm using coyotes as my example, but I can't believe they're the only predator on the planet that has figured out that this is how things work. Having that stress on you of bumping into coyote after coyote after coyote is what drives your litter size to be smaller, that drives fringe females from breeding. So it's not that they take a survey and agree that they're going to have more or fewer babies. It all happens naturally because of this intraspecific stress that's either created or not. So to think about all of that, does coyote control in New York work? Well, it can, if you're really talking about a small area and You do it constantly. You have to do it all. When I say all the time, I don't mean poaching out of the season, but I mean year after year. You have to consistently put in the effort. And everybody out there that hunts knows that the more hunting pressure you put on a population, the sneakier that population gets. The harder it is to get returns. But even if you did do it, how many more deer would result? According to the study done by ESF, not many deer are actually killed by coyotes. And in addition, if I get rid of coyotes, what other prey are going to increase? Well, probably rabbits. That's cool. I like rabbits. Probably squirrels. Awesome. I like squirrels. Probably mice. Oh, I don't particularly like mice. Probably rats. Yeah, I'm not particularly happy about rats either. Okay, so what is the main prey item of coyotes? If it's mice and you get rid of a bunch of coyotes, you're probably going to have more mice. Now, I said probably because if I get rid of coyotes, there might be other predators that increase because of that. If I get rid of the coyotes and I leave more room in the landscape for other predators, maybe my red fox population goes up, maybe my gray fox, maybe my fisher population goes up, maybe mink. I don't know. I'm saying maybe to all these, maybe short-tailed weasel. I don't know. But it's not as simple as me shoot coyotes, deer go up. It's really not that. There's all kinds of other impacts that happen. And maybe maybe it's the coyotes that are helping keep the fisher population in check. Not because the coyote's eating them first, but because the coyotes have a bit of a beef when they come into contact with a fisher. I'm making this up, folks. I'm just giving you a what if. And then if we get rid of the coyotes, the fisher population takes off and they prey on something you liked even more than white-tailed deer. And now I got a problem. Or maybe they're more aggressive towards your chickens, or they're more aggressive towards family pets. I don't think any of those are particularly true, but I'm just saying, what if? It's so easy to find a villain, whether we're talking about society, right, of our problems in society, or whether we're talking about white-tailed deer. And I guarantee you, as we're approaching this season, we're already into the archery season now. Next comes crossbow. Then you got the gun season. The people that aren't seeing enough deer are gonna always blame the coyotes first. I never hear a guy say, "Man, I wish I was a better hunter. I'd see more deer." It's always those damn coyotes, or that stupid so-and-so, or the DC don't know what they're doing. Find a hunter that blames themselves, and let's start from that spot. Wow, I got really judgmental at the end there, but I think some folks need to hear that. As a hunter myself, I get annoyed by hunters that just babble dumb stuff. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. Appreciate that. And we will continue with the next lesson.